Well, hello, everybody. Today we have another great couple of guests with us. We first of all have with us Nancy Grayson, who is the president of the Horizon Community Funds, and Kit Andrews, who is a board of trustee member of Horizon. And thank you both for your time today.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, thanks for having us. This is a great opportunity to talk about some great work.
Absolutely. Well, and Horizon by its nature is a newer organization, been around a short period, but has now, especially during this pandemic, doing great work. So Nancy, first of all, I'll turn it over to you. And what is Horizon again, and really the mission of the organization?
Thanks, Kris. Yes, so we are a community foundation. Horizon Community Funds was founded in 2017 by a group of really passionate leaders, like the two who are joining me here today, really committed to increasing philanthropy in Northern Kentucky. And so we partner with donors individually, with corporations, with nonprofit organizations to make sure that we're really moving the needle on the community in Boone, Kenton, and Campbell counties, and making sure that we're addressing the needs as they arise, even in a pandemic. So things change quite rapidly, but we're always happy to be here and make sure that we can do the best work that we can for our community.
And Kit, as a board member, you're really a couple of key roles. The first and foremost is the effort of the grant making committee that is intended to really deploy dollars. And then, of course, this task force formed to raise money for the pandemic. So update us on that as well.
Yeah, let me talk about the COVID Relief Fund first, because it's been so important for the last nearly a year since this was all begun. Nancy was great at getting some funds deployed just for COVID relief, and we have a terrific group of task force members, representatives from the Butler Foundation, R.C. Durr, and Life Learning Center. And this group of women, all of us women, have been working diligently, and also someone from United Way, to make sure that the funds are deployed in a way that is not repetitive. You know, if you need money and you're a nonprofit, sometimes you'll go to everyone looking for funds, but we want to make sure that there's a collaborative way to give the funds in a way that is not repetitive, that we're not giving the same amount of funds from various organizations, and is deployed in a way that handles basic needs first and foremost. Our first and biggest grants went for food, for pharmacy needs, for educational needs, and for housing, which there was a housing moratorium for a while, but that is ending, and people are filtering a little bit back to work. There's some need with childcare training. I think that the organizations that have done the most, I'd like to shout out for Be Concerned, which has been a consortium of various pantries. Adam runs that, and Aaron Broomall is the wonderful person who runs Faith Community Pharmacy. So those are a couple of people, and there are anecdotal stories along the way that just, you know, shake your heart and make you realize that there are terrific people in this community who work really hard to take care of those in need. And those in need has grown dramatically in the last 10, 11 months.
And you talk about this, the relief fund effort, the dollars raised at the beginning when it was first started. What kind of dollars were raised? And I think you pointed out the issue of kind of being very cautious about not just reacting, but kind of being methodical about deploying those dollars. Maybe you could speak to that a bit, Kit.
Well, Nancy knows exactly how many dollars were raised. I know that
over 2.1 million.
Yeah,
I'm very pleased that our community stepped up, and actually, I think it was over 65% were under $500 in gifts.
That's
yeah.
great.
And, we've talked about corporations, but really there are individuals in there too. A lot of individuals.
Yeah, we're grateful for donors of any walk, so we're grateful to partner with all of them. But to Kit's point, 2.1. And so our community really stepped up because they knew there were going to be a lot of folks who were really going to be in need. And so that was very important. And we've deployed about 800,000.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Kit, I think you've witnessed when we've been in our discussions, we can't put a chicken in every pot. So we have to be very mindful as stewards of this public money. What can we do to make sure we're really helping those who are most in need? So,
well, and to that point, yeah, I mean, what has sprung up are these terrific collaborations. There are probably 30 food pantries just in Northern Kentucky. And Be Concerned was able to form this collaboration of all of these food pantries, so there wasn't a duplication of geographic areas or of foodstuffs that were going out to various pantries. And I think that one of the lasting impacts of this effort will be more collaboration between food pantries.
Great point.
And the opportunity to buy in bulk and separate that bulk and get it to the geographic areas that need it. And the need is so, I mean, I have to tell you this. I know from experience at, for example, Holy Spirit in Newport, the need has grown dramatically, in part because when you get government surplus, you keep track of all the people who are picking up that food, and it depends on how many dependents you have. Well, people have lost jobs. Grandparents are now taking care of more grandchildren, but they aren't the legal guardians of those children, but they need food. You know, addiction has risen. We've seen the numbers of overdose cases that have risen. Grandparents have really stepped in to help these families, and yet they don't qualify for the need that they have. So what these pantries are able to do through Horizon and through other donors is step up to that need. So some really basic, integral parts of our community are getting the need that they have fulfilled because of Horizon.
You know, and you think about the idea, you say collaboration, generosity, intentional deployment of the dollars, and really making sure that if people are willing to play well together, that's really, they're going to get total support from Horizon, which is a great model. As we're now looking at this basic math, you've got 2.1 million raised in relief. You've got 800,000 deployed so far. But the good news is then you're getting ready to do the next steps. How do we look at this now in terms of your all's efforts as we hopefully come to the end of the pandemic? But, you know, to your point, Kit, there's a lot of people, especially in entry-level positions, who were first out of work, maybe have had some relief from federal, et cetera, but there's still this monstrous gap. They need housing, and they've the availability as evictions open back up. There's going to be this window that you're trying to be prepared for. So maybe speak to that a bit.
Well, Nancy knows we're mindful that the need will exist far beyond the incremental end of the pandemic, and in particular with evictions. We have found that there is a need for legal aid. You know, we are supporting legal aid of the Bluegrass so that attorneys can step in where they need to. We are supporting families through St. Vincent de Paul with a fund where they can help people pay their rent. Sometimes it's as simple as, there was one case where a trucker was treated for COVID, very severe case, needed to be hospitalized, long haul trucker. And once he was released from the hospital, he still needed to isolate and he had nowhere to go. We didn't want him to get back in the truck and continue to spread the virus. So Nancy was able to, with the St. E's Foundation collaboration, get this guy a hotel. You know, I mean, little things like that, specific cases, and then greater need that we're able to address. And Nancy's been great about figuring out the need.
Yeah. It's this group of women. I'm going to be honest, I'm really lucky to be among such wonderful, generous, kind-hearted women who are on this group. And so we talk a lot about, you know, the calls that we're getting. We're getting a lot of calls right now while the federal aid is hopefully on its way. I know there's still a lot of discussion about stimulus packages in the Capitol, but right now we're getting calls daily about folks who are really down on their luck. And these stories are really heartbreaking. So to be able to collaborate, even with other funders, to talk about on the larger regional level, even for greater Cincinnati, what the need is, what we're all doing in our own pockets, how do we collaborate and complement one another, I think has become a really great story. And it's a good foundation for us moving forward, pandemic or otherwise. I think we now are better connected, better informed, and have stronger relationships as a result of this process. So as awful as this pandemic is, there are some silver linings. And I think one of the stories of us being able to step up in Northern Kentucky is that we're also able to better inform what the needs are to the greater community, so that then we're able to have that voice. And that's something that I think we've been trying to do for decades now. And I think we're starting to be able to accomplish that goal.
And we've given voice to some organizations that, you know, you may not have known as much about, like Faith Community Pharmacy, which got a lot of samples from various pharmaceutical companies, but those companies have turned to production of vaccine, some of them. And as a result, they're not getting the samples they need for some very basic things like diabetes medications or cholesterol and heart medications. And folks who were being serviced are finding that they can't get their medications. So Faith Community Pharmacy has really stepped up and found a way to use the funds that Horizon and other donors have given them to fill that need as their client base is expanding during COVID.
Absolutely. you both speak to this issue of the other organizations, all of whom have been impacted by fundraising capabilities during this pandemic. And you're speaking to the fact of really kind of working with them to get through the pandemic so they can, everybody's planning big fundraisers in 2021, hopefully summer and fall, but they've got this, some of them have big gaps. And speak to that about how you're trying to, you started that a little bit about trying to make sure that that awareness of that is out there, which is partly why we're talking about it today.
Right. And I think the one thing about our relief fund is we've been very careful to say that it's not for operational support. It really is going directly to the people who need it most. But on the other hand, those agencies that are providing those direct services, they need the help too. So as a group of funders, we have a collaborative called the Northern Kentucky Funders. It's a coalition of different grant making entities who've come together in prior years for pitch competitions. But honestly, when the pandemic hit, it didn't feel, first of all, wise to gather a group of 200 to 300 people in the community to come and listen to pitches. But the nonprofits really are spending a lot of time trying to keep the doors open, trying to understand what protocols need to be in place, government regulations changing very quickly, and trying to be nimble enough to do that while still keeping those that they're serving, supported. And so what we're doing this year is a cohort, a pilot that we've been working on in 2020 that we're going to expand in 2021, where it's a group called Network for Good. They provide a lot of online fundraising support, but they have a charitable arm called Jumpstart. And what they do is provide one-on-one coaching with eligible organizations that have a certain size of staff, maybe have had some experience with individual fundraising, but who need a little bit more help in using data to make better requests and how to build that kind of donor database so that it's not just constant grant making and request and it's going to corporations for sponsorships. That will still happen, but as these organizations are coming out of a pandemic, they need to be able to stand on their own 2 feet and build their own capacity. And so we've seen great success in this pilot so far. And so we want to offer this opportunity to other nonprofits that are serving Northern Kentucky so that they are able to continue their work and to maybe be a little bit more resistant and can be resilient when something like this happens again. God forbid that we have another pandemic, but to be able to stand up and to know that they've got some reserves and they have a loyal following that's going to support them no matter what happens.
Well said. And I know, Kit, in leading the grant group out of Horizon, you've been able to see all this level of groups, and you can speak to this and tell me if I'm wrong, but one thing that's been interesting, in Northern Kentucky, the support of Horizon is key to these groups and other funders, but we've got a lot of groups and very little overlap. There doesn't seem to be, we always want to criticize maybe duplication of services, but there really doesn't seem to be a lot of that going on. The people are able to focus in their lanes and do that well. Speak to that a bit, and then as we wrap up.
Well, we've really learned how to keep people in their lanes too through this pandemic, which has been awesome. I think the collaboration has been good because each of the people in our task force knows the landscape of nonprofits in Northern Kentucky. They understand the leadership and their capacity for organization. And I have learned so much, but more than that, I feel as though the nonprofits in Northern Kentucky are very well led. I feel as though the people who have their lane know what their responsibilities and the needs are, and they are struggling, but maintaining capacity and taking care of their people. And especially during this pandemic, we have learned that each of those lanes is necessary. There are very few people who have come to us with needs that weren't necessary. And even as we look beyond COVID, we're starting to realize that some of the arts organizations that donors don't feel provide basic needs are going to close if we don't start funding the Kentucky Symphony and the Carnegie and the Behringer Crawford. Because while they may not have been important to food-related or pharmacy-related needs, they're still important to our community. And so part of what Jumpstart will do is help them understand how to better raise those funds and keep development people on staff. We have seen, or I have seen throughout this, that development staff, there's a huge turnover. It's frustrating to ask people for money. Yep. It's much easier to give it away. Nancy and I have a much easier job, but what Jumpstart can do is teach these people how better to ask, how better to maintain employees within their organizations, and how better to collaborate with other organizations who may be in the same space.
Well, to both of you, thanks for the great work. Thanks for this update today, and really to highlight Horizon, the generosity of Northern Kentucky, and the great work of these organizations, and all of which we could probably list them for the next hour. But lastly, I want to say thanks. You're right. You put women in charge of stuff and it gets done. With my 4 sisters and a strong mother and a strong wife, I know the world would have ended if they weren't in charge. So thanks for your leadership and what you're doing.
You're very gracious and very correct.
Thank you, Kris. And thank you, Kit.
Thank you.